Hi, this is Sue Jackson of the Book by Book blog, and I'm here finally with my 2021 reading wrap-up. These are, well, I'll talk about several things. I am a little late with this, but it's not the end of January yet, so I consider that still on time. As regular viewers of my channel know, I got COVID the first week of the year, and the first 3 weeks were really rough. I'm starting to come out of it now and feeling better, so I finally got my best books of the year post up on my blog, and so I thought I would tell you about it here. First, I'm going to go through just quickly some facts and statistics, fun facts and statistics about my reading year. And then I'll give you my top picks in a bunch of different categories. And then I will very quickly run through some of my top 10. So in 2021, I read a total of 78 books, which was just slightly less than in previous years. But as you know, I host the Big Book Summer Challenge every summer. So I don't get too caught up in the number of books read because some of my books are really long. So 78 books total, and of those, 45 were adult fiction, which is about 58%. I do definitely read a lot more fiction than nonfiction. 11 of my 78 books were adult nonfiction, that's 14%. 10 of my books were teen or young adult, that's 13%. 12 middle grade books, about 15%. And of the 78 books, 25 of them I listened to on audio. 10 of them were graphic novels or graphic memoirs. There were 4 short story collections, which is a little more than I usually get to, so that was fun. And once again, 0 poetry. I really struggle with poetry, so I don't tend to gravitate toward it. Though I would like to find some poetry collections that I enjoy. So far, I haven't had a lot of luck with that. So out of my 78 books, 47 of them, or 60%, were written by women authors. 33 books, or 42%, were diverse books, meaning that either the characters or the author were from a diverse background, different than my own. That's a little lower than previous years, so I would like to read a little more diverse books in 2022. 38 of my 78 books were from my own shelves. That's a little under 50%. That's 49%. I have to do better on that because I am losing the fight. Our TBR bookcase now has double rows on most shelves. Yeah, so I really need to focus on reading more from my own shelves. I join a TBR challenge every single year, so that helps motivate me. Of my 78 books, only 1 was a reread. I re-listened to Becoming by Michelle Obama. One of my book groups was going to discuss it. And I started out thinking, I had it on audio, I thought, I'll just listen to a few pieces just to remind myself so that I can join the discussion. And I ended up re-listening to the whole thing. It's just a great book. Authors read more than once. There was only 1, Connie Willis. And the shortest book I read in 2021 was The Importance of Being Earnest by Oscar Wilde. That's a play, and it's only 94 pages. The longest book I read was for the Big Book Summer Challenge. That was Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy at 964 pages. So, yeah, that may be why there was like 2 less than the year before. My average book length was 353 pages. So, now, time for the top books. So what I usually do is choose my favorite book of the year in each of several categories. Now, I really struggled to make a decision in adult fiction. And for the first time ever, I actually settled on 2 books as a tie for first place for best adult fiction read in 2021. And those 2 books were The Heart's Invisible Furies by John Boyne and A Gentleman in Moscow by Amor Towles. I kept going back and forth between these 2 books, and I could not choose one over the other because both of them made me laugh out loud. Both of them made me cry more than once. Both of them were so thoughtful and in-depth that there were quotes that I wanted to write down in my quote journal after I read them, things that I wanted to remember. Both just really affected me emotionally. Both of these books I gave a perfect 10 rating to. Both of my book groups use a 1 to 10 scale. These both got, and I read both of these for book group, they both got perfect 10s. So I just couldn't choose one over the other. I went back and forth a few times and just said, no, they've got to both win. So that was my tie for first place in adult fiction. The best nonfiction book I read in 2021 was The Sixth Extinction by Elizabeth Colbert. This book just blew me away. And it was another one I read for book group. Book groups are great for introducing you to good books. And my whole book group felt the same way. It was not only, as nonfiction, it was not only fascinating and educational, but it was also so engrossing, so well written. Even though the topic is kind of scary, the book was actually entertaining. It's kind of combination science, history, and travel memoir, because the author went to all kinds of different places to do the research for this book. Just a really amazing book. I highly recommend it. My best memoir for the year was No Cure for Being Human by Kate Bowler. The full title, there's a subtitle here, No Cure for Being Human and Other Truths I Need to Hear. Kate Bowler is like my personal hero. I love her podcast, Everything Happens. She's living with stage 4 cancer, so she understands what chronic illness is like. And as she often points out, life is not perfect for any of us. There are always challenges in any life, and that's what her focus is on. I loved this book. My favorite audiobook in 2021 was The Night Watchman by Louise Erdrich. I've talked a lot about Louise here lately because I just finished her most recent novel, The Sentence. She's just such an amazing writer. Her stories are so beautiful and intricate. Her writing is wonderful. Her characters just make you care so much. The Night Watchman, it was a little different than most of her novels because it incorporated some history. It was really historical fiction about a time when the U.S. government tried to remove Native Americans from their lands and integrate them into cities. It was really a horrible piece of American history that most of us probably have never heard of. So it was fascinating in that respect, but also, like I said, Louise is just such a great writer, and you care about her characters, and The Night Watchman was no exception. Oh, also, the reason it's the best audio is because Louise Erdrich reads her own novels on her audiobooks. And she is the perfect narrator for her own novels. Just listening to her intonations, her accent, her, she just, as the author, she knows what to emphasize. And it's just perfect. So The Night Watchman by Louise Erdrich, best audiobook of the year. My best teen young adult novel of the year or book of the year was Young Man with Camera by Emil Scher. Emil Scher? Gotta look that up again. This was kind of a little known book that had been sitting on my review shelf for like 6 years. And I am so glad I finally picked it up because it blew me away. It incorporates, it's about a boy. He was disfigured in an accident when he was a little kid. And he kind of deals with his life by taking photos. And the book has actual photographs in it. So the main character is dealing with bullies. And the bullies become very violent. And he is stuck. The main character is stuck because he witnessed his bullies doing something horrific. And he's trying to figure out whether he should tell someone because they know he saw them and they've threatened him and his family and his best friend. So that's what the book's about. It is excellent. It is such emotional depth. It's a really engaging novel. And I just loved the way the author interspersed real photographs in with the text. That's Young Man with Camera by Emil Scher, my top book, my top young adult novel read in 2021. Similarly, my top pick for middle grade book for 2021 is another one that just blew me away. It's called Drums, Girls, and Dangerous Pie by Jordan Sonnenblick. This book, it made me laugh out loud. It made me cry. It is just an amazing book. And I definitely want to read more from Jordan because this book just blew me away. It had a huge impact on me. Highly recommended. And finally, the best graphic novel or memoir was kind of a middle grade teen novel. It sort of straddled the age groups, called Flamer by Mike Curato. This was a graphic memoir about, I think the boy is 13 in it, about the author's summer when he was that age. He's beginning to think he might be gay, but he was brought up in a very strict Catholic upbringing. And has been told his whole life that that is wrong. So it's about his summer that year at Boy Scout camp, which he has always before just loved. And this year he's really feeling, he's struggling. He's struggling with his own identity. It is an outstanding graphic novel, an outstanding memoir, and I really loved it. Flamer by Mike Curato. So those are my top picks. I guess I will just try to very quickly go through my top 10 in each category. It's not always 10. I'm going to do this a little quicker without really talking much about each book, just so that, you know, I don't make an hour-long video. Oh, and I left out of my my best books, I left out the category short stories. I did read 4 different short story collections. My favorite was Not the End of the World by Kate Atkinson. I loved Kate Atkinson's Life After Life novel, and I've been meaning to read more by her ever since. The short story collection did not disappoint. Okay, so my top 10 adult fiction read in 2021, and I'm just going to go through these quickly alphabetically. So these aren't in order of likeness, they're just in order alphabetically. First, The Air You Breathe by Frances DuPont Peebles. This was another review book that had sat on my shelf for years, And I don't know why I let it sit there for so long. It was wonderful. It's historical fiction. Highly recommended. Next, a pair of books by Connie Willis. These were the, as I mentioned earlier, the only 2 books by the same author I read all last year. Blackout actually comes first, not alphabetically, but it's a 2-book series. Blackout and then All Clear. They are both about future time travelers who go back in time to the World War II England and get stuck there. Outstanding. These, especially the second one, All Clear, was actually a contender for Best Book of the Year. But I already ended up with a 2-way tie, so I didn't think I needed a 3-way tie. But it's that good. Just outstanding books, both of them. Next up, The Book of Longings by Sue Monk Kidd. This was a book I did not expect to like. One of my book groups chose it. I thought, I'm not going to like this. And I ended up loving it. That's book groups. It is historical fiction set during biblical times. And Jesus is actually a character in here. But the focus in this story is on the women. And everyone in my book group loved it. Next up, Clock Dance by Ann Tyler. I had forgotten how much I love Ann Tyler. It had been years since I'd read one of her books, probably more than a decade. My son gave this to me for Mother's Day, and I absolutely loved it. This is a finish reading and hold it to your chest book. I loved the character. I love the main character and the side characters. I loved the story. It's just so heartwarming and beautiful and funny. It's just great. Definitely going to read more Ann Tyler. Next up were my 2 that tied for first place. A Gentleman in Moscow by Amor Towles and The Heart's Invisible Furies by John Boyne. The Night Watchman by Louise Erdrich, which got my vote for Best Audiobook of the Year. And another one read for book group, though this one was my own suggestion because it's another book that had been sitting on my shelves for years. It's called The Summer Guest by Justin Cronin. Now, Cronin is famous for the Passage trilogy, which are like sci-fi, action, horror. This is nothing like that. You can probably tell by the cover. This is a quiet story about family and love. It takes place in the Northwoods of Maine. I actually bought it in Maine, which tells you how long ago I bought it because we haven't been there in quite a while. But it was a wonderful book, highly recommended, and probably not well known. The Summer Guest by Justin Cronin. And the final book in my top 10 adult fiction for 2021 was The Vanishing Half by Britt Bennett. This is historical fiction. It's about 2 sisters back in, I'm trying to think when it starts, maybe the 60s. They're 2 black sisters growing up in Louisiana, and they moved to New Orleans when they're 16. I think they're twins. And at one point, their lives split. And one sister starts dating a white man and passing for white. And the other sister moves up to New York and has a completely different life. And the sisters are estranged for years and then come back together. It also deals with the next generation, their children. Wonderful book, completely engrossing, but also, just really powerful. That's The Vanishing Half by Britt Bennett. So those were my top 10 fiction. Real quick, I'm just going to go through my top 8 in nonfiction, including memoir. Once again, second year in a row, Becoming by Michelle Obama makes the list. Also, Also, Crying in H Mart by Michelle Zauner. Finally got around to reading this memoir that everyone was raving about. I read it during Nonfiction November, and yes, it is excellent. It's about food and family, and particularly a mother-daughter relationship with a Korean-American daughter. An Elegant Defense, The Extraordinary New Science of the Immune System by Matt Richtel. I listened to this one on audio, and I was looking forward to it because I have an immune disorder and I really wanted to learn more. But the book really was just amazing. The author is a journalist, not a doctor or scientist, so he explains things in a way that lay people can understand. And I learned so much, but it was also really interesting and engaging to listen to. Next on nonfiction, I'll Be Gone in the Dark, One Woman's Obsessive Search for the Golden State Killer by Michelle McNamara. Also read for Nonfiction November. I don't read a lot of true crime generally, but this was excellent. Kind of a combination of true crime and memoir, and I really enjoyed it. And that was a gift from my son's girlfriend for my birthday, so I really appreciated that. Nature's Best Hope by Doug Tallamy. That was one read for my neighborhood book group. The author is actually from this local area, from northern Delaware. The book is about the importance of planting native plants in your own yard, even if you've got a tiny yard. The impact it makes if everyone plants native plants. Our whole book group was just fascinated by this book. We learned a lot. It inspired many of us, including me, to go to the local nature center's native plant sale in the spring. It took us, my husband and I, a month, but we did get everything planted. The book was excellent. Lots of photographs in it too. You already heard about No Cure for Being Human by Kate Bowler. That's in my top 10. That was number 1. Another one was The Sisters of Auschwitz by Roxanne van Yperen. It's about 2 Dutch sisters during World War II that they were Jewish themselves and in hiding, but they created a safe haven for other people and did a huge amount of work forging documents and sheltering people, all kinds of things to try to save people during the Holocaust. I always think that I know everything there is to know about World War II because I've read so many books, but this one covered new ground. These women's lives were just amazing. I'm really glad I read it. And finally, my number 1 pick for nonfiction for 2021, The Sixth Extinction by Elizabeth Kolbert. My top 5 teen young adult books, All of This Is True by Ligia de Peñaflor. That was, I think I listened to that on audio for Big Book Summer, but it's just slightly over 400 pages. And I just loved it. It's kind of mystery, not true crime, kind of a mystery. It's just really good. And it utilizes different kinds of writing. Like there are excerpts from books, there are emails, it's great. So highly recommend that. Dragon Hoops by Jean Lewin Yang was an excellent graphic nonfiction book about high school basketball. Not a topic I have any interest in it at all, but the author made it fascinating. As I mentioned, my number 1 pick for, this might have been my number 1 pick for graphic novels and memoirs, Flamer by Mike Curato. And my number 1 pick for YA books, Young Man with Camera by Emil Scher. And finally, the last book that I listened to in 2021, what made my top 5, and that was Zara Hussein is Here by Sabina Khan. This was an excellent YA novel about a young girl who's grown up in the US in Texas, but her family are immigrants from Pakistan, and they're in danger of having to move back because of bullying that turns violent. It was an excellent book, highly recommended. Okay, my top 5 middle grade books were A Corner of White by Jacqueline Moriarty. This was just a fun fantasy novel that I listened to on audio. I don't like a lot of fantasy, but this mixed real world and a fantasy world, and I do like that. As I said, my top pick for middle grade last year was Drums, Girls, and Dangerous Pie by Jordan Sonnenblick. Way back in, I think, January of 2021, I listened to A Home for Goddesses and Dogs by Leslie Connor. I always love her novels. She's great. One of my other top 5 middle grade novels was Other Boys by Damian Alexander, which is also a graphic novel, or graphic memoir. And also listened to on audio The Remarkable Journey of Coyote Sunrise by Dan Gemmenhart, another favorite middle grade author. Everything he writes is great, but this was one of my favorites. And I think that's about it. I think I've covered just about everything. I was trying to keep this under 30 minutes. So I had an excellent reading year in 2021. I'd love to hear about your favorite books that you read last year. Let me know in the comments down below, or if you have your own video or blog post, link to it so that I can go see it. I hope that 2022 is just as good.